may continue.
To talk about the deteriorating political situation in the country of Georgia, and to strongly urge the United States government to take immediate action in response. Now, Senator Risch and I have had a long history of working together on Georgia. We were there in 2012 when Georgia Dream took over in Georgia. We were part of the election observation team. We agreed those were free and fair elections. Senator Risch was very eloquent in talking to President Saakashvili at the time, or Prime Minister, about the need to hand over power because it was a free and fair election, and we needed to do that. Well, in October, Georgia held parliamentary elections, and the vote took place against a backdrop of threats, in some cases even violence. And there's evidence that the ruling party, Georgia Dream, specifically targeted activists, opposition figures, and ordinary voters. Consequently, those elections, unlike the elections in 2012 that we observed, have not been deemed free and fair. And the majority of the Georgian people, understandably so, do not support the election results. In the aftermath, Georgian Dream government decided to yank Georgia off of its Euro-Atlantic path. It announced the country would cease negotiating with the European Union over its accession to the bloc. Of course, it's a move that pleased Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin and reinforced to many his influence over the politics and the policy of Georgia. This step directly contravened Georgia's own constitution, where the Georgian people enshrined their commitment to joining both the EU and NATO, and it has rightfully caused outrage across the country. For 2 weeks, we've seen widespread protests that brought thousands of people into the streets. The protests are being led by young people who have grown up in an independent Georgia, in a country that was looking toward a better, more democratic future. In an attempt to control those peaceful protesters, the government has responded with brutal force. And over the last 2 weeks, we've seen Georgian Dream target opposition politicians, media, and protest organizers, not only using force in an attempt to disperse crowds, but rounding up individuals at their homes, beating them, and detaining them. That is not what a democracy does. Now, the president of Georgia, President Zurabishvili, has stood in solidarity with the protesters. She's urged the government to stop its campaign of violence against its own people. But now, in a very concerning turn, Georgian Dream intends to appoint a new president this weekend by holding a vote in Parliament where only its members are participating. A new president and commander-in-chief, one who stands with Georgian Dream and supports the Kremlin, could dramatically escalate an already volatile situation. Now, as we think about why this is important to the United States, since 1992, the U.S.-Georgia partnership has been based on shared democratic values. We've partnered with the Georgian people, successive Georgian governments to build democratic institutions, a professional civilian-controlled military, and a vibrant civil society capable of cementing the country's transatlantic future. Georgia is an EU candidate country. It has been, until recently, a close, reliable partner for NATO and the United States. Georgia joined the U.S.-led coalition in the Iraq War in 2003, and Georgian soldiers deployed to Afghanistan in 2004. This is a country and a people who have stood by the United States, and it's time now for us to stand by them. That's why it's so distressing to see what's happening in the country, and why we need to see action from our government to condemn what's going on there. The leadership of Georgian Dream is a political party that was founded in 2012 by a billionaire who's made his money in Russia and who has drawn increasingly from the Kremlin's playbook in recent months. They've adopted laws and policies aimed at constraining civil society's ability to operate including a foreign agents law that's meant to vilify civic activists as dangerous outside agents. So what are we doing as the United States? How are we supporting the Georgian people? Well, I'm very frustrated because in my view, we are not doing enough. We are failing to meet this moment and answer this call. We have failed to respond in a meaningful way that would help change the calculus of Georgian Dream's leadership. They are paying no price for their actions as they defy the will of the people and take pages from Putin's authoritarian playbook. There are well-documented human rights violations, but the Treasury Department has failed to sanction a single official for their actions. It's perplexing. I don't understand it, and I urge the administration to act immediately. Georgia's future is in jeopardy, and the Georgian people who have repeatedly supported us deserve our support. Treasury has all the authorities it needs under Global Magnitsky Act and other sanctions legislation to hold officials to account for the brutal human rights violations they are currently committing against Georgian citizens. This is not a hard call. The next 2 weeks are critical for Georgia. The administration has bipartisan, bicameral support to act. I urge the U.S. administration to stand with the Georgian people and their fight for a democratic future. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield to my colleague.
Mr. President.
Senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, first of all, let me say I want to fully associate myself with the remarks of my colleague from New Hampshire. She has said it about as well as it can be said, but I'm going to underscore it and go back. As she said, in 2012, she and I were the appointed representatives of the United States to look at and monitor the elections in Georgia. And I have to tell you, it was an interesting process to do that. We looked and watched the election. From our point of view, it was a straight-up election. It was well done, well executed. And at the end of the day, the incumbent, President Saakashvili, lost. Mr. Ivanishvili's Dream Party won. We had the interesting experience the next morning going to see both camps. And one of the things that gave me great hope is it was very much like an American election. Both camps were still in campaign mode when we talked to them. But as Senator Shaheen indicated, we had very candid discussions with both sides. And frankly, before we left the region, I think we went to Turkey after that, but before we left the region, they had made agreements that they were going to talk about a transition that would be a peaceful transition. That was really, really a good sign. And I have to tell you, we left there really quite optimistic that things were headed in the right direction, that here they had this election that was a spirited election, but that came out the way the people of Georgia wanted it to come out, and that things would go forward. It wasn't too long after that we started to have suspicions that it wasn't going as well as it should. And indeed, that was the case, and it continued to deteriorate and continues to deteriorate today to where it is of an urgent nature. Look, this country is a country that after Ronald Reagan brought down the Soviet Union and all these countries got their freedom, most of them took it. This is one of those countries that has not been able to get complete footing and get the complete shake-off of Russia that it wants. The ghosts of the Russian Empire still are there in that country, and they're showing up in what's happening today. The tactics that are being used by the government that's in place today are the tactics that they use in Russia. It is brutal. It involves tortures, it involves arrests, it involves all the things that we see from the old Soviet Union. This is not what the Georgian people want. And you say, well, how can you say that? The Georgian Constitution actually has enshrined in it that they will pursue, and they have been pursuing, membership in the European Union. When that happens, of course, things change dramatically in the country. They go to much more of Western values than what they inherited from the old Soviet Union. And that's the direction the Georgian people want to go. And again, not only is it in the Constitution, the polling there says that 80% of the people want to continue to pursue both European Union membership and NATO membership. So what has the current government done about it, Georgian Dream? Well, they've done the things that the good senator from New Hampshire has laid out. They have done awful things that resulted in arrests and in torture and the kinds of things that autocratic governments do in order to get their way. The Georgian people have not stood by passively and let this happen. There have been lots of protests in the country over recent weeks. Indeed, some of them are quite violent because the Georgian Dream Party is cracking down on these people who are just simply trying to pursue their dreams for Georgia, both as expressed in the Constitution and expressed by the will of the people. We had an opportunity to talk to the president of Georgia just recently, and came away again disappointed with the way things are happening. But look, there's hope here. We passed a bill that gives the Biden administration the ability to go in and levy sanctions on the people that should be sanctioned. And it's not a secret. We know who they are. They know who they are. The State Department knows who they are. The Biden administration knows who they are. So let's get at it. And just as my colleague from New Hampshire, I am deeply, deeply disappointed that we haven't done that. Look, putting sanctions on is not a strain on this country. It's easy to do. But it can be and will be a real strain on the people who are sanctioned. We really need to do that. And like my friend from New Hampshire, I don't understand why it's not being done. Is it incompetence? Is it laziness? Is it that they don't know better? We've all talked to them, but it just doesn't get done. So again, I want to join in with my friend from New Hampshire and urge the administration to step in and do what should be done. Follow the law that we've put in place. Take the opportunities for sanctions that we've put in place. I want to continue to be hopeful for the Georgian people. They don't want what's going on there. They don't want to drift back to the Soviet Union or to Russia. They want to look westward. They, by their constitution, by their own will, they want to be part of the European Union and part of NATO. Let's give them every help that we can possibly do, and it won't cost us anything. So with that, thank you, and I will yield the floor.